This is An Economy of One with Gary Rathbun.
This is our country.
Joining me now is Dinesh D Souza, author of several books, including America, Imagine a World Without Her, and Obama's America, Unmaking the American Dream. He's also a filmmaker of the breakout documentary 2016, Obama's America. He's got a new book out called Stealing America, What My Experience with Criminal Gangs Taught Me About Obama, Hillary, and the Democratic Party. Dinesh, welcome to An Economy of One.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Good to be on the show.
I really enjoyed reading your book, and one of the things I found very interesting was the similarity between the people you met when you were in confinement and the politicians today. Other than the colorful language, how similar are they with today's politicians?
Well, I got an exposure to the criminal underclass because the Obama administration went after me for exceeding the campaign finance laws.
Right.
I donated money to a college friend of mine over the campaign finance limit, and I got 8 months of overnight confinement. Now, in this confinement center were all kinds of hoodlums. I mean, guys who had done time for armed robbery, drug smugglers, coyotes, one guy who was in for attempted murder, the whole gamut. Wow. And as I began to talk to these guys, get to know them, I realized that there's a weird similarity between them and the politicians. Basically, the similarity is this, that the criminal underclass is made up of small fry. Those guys do petty intimidation, robbery, whereas the politicians do major intimidation. They rob the treasury, they loot the taxpayer, and they're able to do it while pretending to be the good guys, whereas at least the criminal underclass, when they hold up a grocery store, don't act like they have a halo for doing it.
And that's one of the interesting things you talk about is everything that some of us look at and read indicate that most of the guys in jail, they admit their innocence. That's just not the case from your experience, unlike the politicians that are all innocent and have our best interest in mind.
What I think is remarkable about politicians is their chutzpah. You know, so here's Harry Reid. He takes money from his campaign finance fund to give gifts to his daughter or granddaughter for her wedding. Now, this is blatant abuse of the election laws. And yet, no investigation, no prosecution, no conviction. And so the Obama administration, they're supposed to be the custodian of Lady Justice, but Lady Justice is always winking when it comes to the offenses of Obama and his friends.
And talking about the theft of the country, you tell us that you're referring to the internal theft by the democratic political process rather than a dictatorship process. Can you clarify what you mean there? Because that's a little puzzling, or can be.
Yeah, the phrase stealing America refers to two things. I mean, first it refers to the fact that politicians like Hillary have been able to amass enormous personal wealth. The Clintons went from zero to $200 million in a very short time. Their foundation is over $2 billion. Now, normally in America, you can only make that kind of money if you invent the iPhone or start some kind of a transformative new type of business.
Right.
Well, they didn't do that. So how did they get all that money? Well, the answer is they figured out how to make policy and government pay, how to collect money through the political process. So that's the first part of stealing America. It's ripping off the system and getting rich. Now, the second theme of stealing America is how the wealth of America, the wealth of private industry, the wealth that is in people's bank accounts and college savings funds and mortgages, how the progressives from Obama to Hillary have been figuring out how to confiscate and control and appropriate that wealth for their own purposes. And that is a major ripoff that's been going on through the democratic process, using voters as instruments in order to expand progressive power and self-enrichment.
Now, you spend a lot of time talking about that, and you spend a lot of time talking about the influence of Saul Alinsky on President Obama and Hillary Clinton, and how his tactics are constantly being used, and even, and I never drew this connection either, even his tactics were part of the 2008 housing crisis, and that being a motivation to steal money from banks. And who was doing the stealing, and what was their motivation behind that?
Well, Alinsky has written a couple of books that have been widely discussed, and they talk about his community activist strategy. But the really interesting part of Alinsky is rarely discussed, and that is that Alinsky was kind of a gangster. He was a petty thief on the streets of Chicago. He later fell in with a series of criminal gangs, ultimately ending up with the Al Capone gang, and that's basically where he learned his political lessons. He would see the mafia shake down people for money, and Alinsky goes, how can I do that without running the risk of getting knocked off? And so he came up with the idea of politics. If you can intimidate people through the political process and get them to pay you, then ultimately you can get rich without facing the danger that you'll end up with a bullet in your head. And so Alinsky then became a model and inspiration for people as diverse as Jesse Jackson, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton. Obama had no ties to Chicago, but kept going back to Chicago because he knew that Alinsky was a major con man, and he wanted to learn these con man techniques. And similarly, Hillary, who wrote her undergraduate thesis at Wellesley College on Alinsky, wanted to master what Alinsky had to teach her.
Is part of that creating crises so that you can take advantage of them? I mean, Rahm Emanuel
or Bill de Blasio in New York. Look, the Alinsky approach is a little different than what Hillary and Obama have been doing. They've been, in a sense, advanced beyond Alinsky because Alinsky was an outside guy who would try to threaten and intimidate corporations or city officials, like the Daley people in Chicago or Eastman Kodak in Rochester, New York. What Hillary and Obama have done is they've realized, what if we can get inside the government and then use the agencies of the government to intimidate other people? So let's use the EPA, the IRS, the FBI. I found in my own case, for example, that, a whole squadron of FBI agents is deployed to read all my books, look at my bank statements, check out my tax returns. There's a kind of unbelievable deployment of power against political critics, which you need the unlimited resources of the federal government in order to be able to marshal. So poor Alinsky never became such a big-time hoodlum as we have now seen occur with his mentor, with his students, Obama and now Hillary.
So the students have become the master, kind of in Alinsky tactics and using the government to create that fear and intimidation in us.
Yes, and also to profit immensely. I mean, look at we've had petty corruption at the local level in American politics before.
Right.
Tammany Hall was a big racket in New York City. Even the Daley machine was corrupt in Chicago. But we've never had a Secretary of State who figured out how to extract money from Russian oligarchs, how to get money out of Canadian billionaires who are investing in minerals in Africa, how to intercept aid money that is designated for starving people in Haiti, and to have that money end up in the coffers of the Clinton Foundation. So Hillary Clinton and Bill are in a league of their own in figuring out how to run not just an American political ripoff, but a global political ripoff.
Wow. Now, something we haven't heard about, an organization I haven't heard much about the last few years, and that's Acorn. They haven't gone away, I'm sure. How big of a role does Acorn play in the overall plan for helping these people steal America?
Well, Acorn sort of took a big hit when they were exposed a couple of years ago, and so they've had to pull back a little bit. But the Obama network of community activists, these are basically local thugs who use political intimidation at the local level. This network has only expanded, and I think it's Obama's ambition when he leaves office to become ultimately the community organizer of America. So Bill Clinton is trying to be the community organizer of the world, and Obama's trying to be the community organizer of America. Neither of these two guys productively, in the capitalist sense, knows how to make a nickel. Right. They can't run a grocery store or a dry cleaner, but they know how to use the political process in order to gain power and money for themselves.
I'm speaking with Dinesh D Souza, author of the book Stealing America, What My Experience with Criminal Gangs Taught Me About Obama, Hillary, and the Democratic Party, and about what he learned after spending some time in a criminal detention center. You know, one of the scams you talk about is the progressives trying to destroy capitalism. Why is capitalism such an evil concept to these people?
Well, I think it's not so much that they want to destroy it. What they actually want to do is to control the wealth that capitalism generates. So they want somebody else to create wealth, and they then want to come in and take it. So they're thieves in the classic sense. Socialism traditionally has involved the government actually nationalizing the banks, running the energy sector. But for Obama and Clinton, it's too much trouble for them to go dig, minerals out of the ground or figure out how to do fracking and get oil. They don't want to do it. They want the private sector to do it. But once you and I have worked hard and built up a nest egg and put money aside, then these progressives want to come in and take it, or at least take control of it, so that they're able to tell us what to do with it. So we've seen under Obama the government expand its power over banking, over insurance, over the automobile sector, over healthcare, every hospital, every hospice, every doctor. Now they're trying to move into education. So these are all parts of the private sector where great wealth is available, great wealth is created, and ultimately what the progressives are saying is you create it, and then we'll come and tell you what to do with it.
And it seems disheartening to me because they often get players in the private sector to play along with them. I mean, you spend some time talking about Warren Buffett and some of these people that have created tremendous wealth, and they seem to move over to the progressive side. Is that guild? Is it another way of allowing them to steal part of America? I mean, what's the motivation there for these people?
The motivation is that Obama is happy to enrich some people in the private sector as long as they're willing to be part of the progressive racket. So a really good example would be in Obamacare, where Obama pretends like he's conspiring with the American people against the health insurance companies. But in reality, it's the opposite. He's conspiring with the health insurance companies against the American people. Now, how? Because Obama goes to the health insurance CEOs and he basically says, listen, I got a deal for you. I'm going to increase control and regulation of your company, and you're not going to like that. But I'm also going to force millions of Americans to buy insurance who don't want to buy insurance. And that's going to mean new customers, hundreds of millions of dollars in profits for you. So I want you to support Obamacare, because ultimately what I'm doing is I'm arm wrestling the American taxpayer and taking money that's going to go ultimately into your pocket. So now you can see why it becomes in the financial interest for the health insurance companies to line up behind Obamacare, because he is ultimately helping them as long as they're willing to help him.
So the players are willing to play the game as long as the game is profitable. And I mean, because we've seen companies now already, United Healthcare, saying, you know what, we may get out of the business. Is that part of the game? Is that the statement they put out so that they get another big check or another advantage to being part of Obamacare?
Well, Saul Alinsky once said that he could persuade a millionaire on Friday to support a revolution on Saturday, out of which he would make a profit on Sunday, even though he was going to be executed on Monday. And so part of what's going on here is that Obama and Hillary are trying to put that Alinskyite lesson into place. They're trying to con the private sector into supporting them, even though, of course, they have no long-term sympathy for these people. I don't think Obama has a moment's compassion for the insurance companies.
Right.
He's willing to be in bed with them as long as they're increasing his power. But once they've increased his power sufficiently, he's happy to tighten the noose around them. I mean, that happened, for example, with Lenin in the early days of the Soviet Union, where private sector people supported him, and then he got rid of all of them.
That's incredible. You know, I want to switch gears just a little bit. It'll sound a little non sequitur, but you say in the book that the key to understanding the justice system in America is not necessarily based on justice, but how to extract the most money. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I think in one of my chapters in Stealing America, I just basically asked this question: what is the most valuable thing the world has ever produced? Is it Fort Knox with all its gold? Is it a particular invention like the automobile or the computer? No. The most valuable thing the world has produced is the United States of America. Why? Because the United States of America has created this massive mound of wealth, some $75 trillion of wealth. And it's done it in a relatively short time. Now, my point is, when you have that big of an accumulation of wealth, the most clever thieves in the world are going to be interested. They're going to try to figure out, how do we take this wealth? We're not talking here about robbing Fort Knox, and we're not talking even about the federal government. The federal budget is about $3 trillion a year. We're talking about the whole wealth of the entire country. And that, I argue, is what the progressives have their eye on. They want to ultimately control all that wealth, including all the private wealth that we have in our own bank accounts, our own savings funds, and our own college tuition funds for our kids. They want to control all that wealth. So that's what this book is about. It's the effort to steal the entire wealth of America in the name of social justice. Social justice is, you may say, the pitch. One thing I learned in the confinement center is that all criminal scams have a pitch. If you want to rob an old lady and you want to break into her apartment, it really helps if you can sell her on a scam where she lifts the latch and then you can kick in the door and go take her stuff. But what you say to her, the sweet talk that you give her at the door to convince her to lift the latch, that's called the pitch. So social justice is the progressive's pitch in order to pull off the heist.
How is this whole experience? I mean, I read all your writings in the past. I've gone to your movies, and I followed you very closely because I think you're very wise and interesting. How has this whole experience changed your opinion of President Obama from the time you made your films about his history and motivation to now?
Well, I think in this book, in the last year, I've begun to see the kind of gangsterism of the government much more clearly. I used to think the United States was in some fundamental way in its operations different from countries like Mexico or Venezuela or India, where I grew up. But although my love of America is undiminished, my love of the American dream, of the American ideas, of all the people who start out penniless and work hard and make their way up the ladder, that's the America I love. But the American government, even Obama, I mean, my earlier movie on Obama focused on the anti-colonialism of Obama, and while we agree or disagree with that, that is an ideology, that is a set of beliefs. I think what I've realized since then is that there is a sort of lawlessness and gangsterism about Obama, about Hillary, and so that you can't understand those people solely in terms of an ideology. You also have to look at them in terms of what are the techniques that they're willing to use in order to achieve their objectives.
In your last chapter, you talk about cracking the con and that the thieves have one vulnerability, and that's that they have to be elected. How do we crack the con?
Well, this is a con that operates through the democratic process. It requires the collaboration of voters in order to pull it off. And happily, this is an election year. I don't just mean that we should all be vigilant and go out and vote. I also mean that we are also very powerful these days using technology through social media in being able to influence others. If you've got 500 friends on Facebook, for example, you're a little publisher with a small magazine, so to speak. And so I'm calling on people to read my book for sure, but use it as a handbook to then connect with other people and build, if you will, movements that can influence American politics and transform this country right back into the principles that made it great.
We're speaking with Dinesh D Souza, author of the new book, Stealing America, Why My Experience with Criminal Gangs Taught Me About Obama, Hillary, and the Democratic Party. Dinesh, this is a terrific book. You're a great American. It's been a real thrill and a true honor for me to spend a little time with you today, and I hope we get the chance to chat with you again soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
I want you to have a great day. Be an individual. Be self-reliant. Be an economy of one. I'm Gary Rathbun. We'll see you next time.
This is our